This is Tar Heel Talk, an in-depth look at the issues and people making news in North Carolina. Here's your host, Sonia Williams.
We hear stories of bullying, child abuse, and sexual assault in the news all too often. And my guest today says keeping kids safe is the duty of everyone. And she's co-authored a book explaining why and how. It's called Doing Right by Our Kids, Protecting Child Safety at All Levels. Joining me now is Dr. Amy Tiemann, child safety expert, author, and educator. Dr. Tiemann, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Now, your new book really takes a comprehensive look and approach to child safety. Give us an overview of some of the things that you're talking about.
Well, awareness is very high right now with recent abuse revelations in the Me Too era, but if we just have awareness without knowing what to do, that really causes anxiety. So I'm really proud that in Doing Right by Our Kids, we are taking a look at child safety, everything from what parents and guardians can do at home, in the neighborhood, in their inner circles, and then going out into the world to schools, sports teams, faith communities, and other organizations we're involved with. So we want the adults to be creating a safe community, and then within that, we want to teach kids some skills that they can use to keep themselves safe.
Right. And you talk about the Me Too era and that, you address an issue, a topic that has been in the news particularly frequently in the last maybe year or two, and that's the issue around consent and helping parents understand what that means. Talk a little bit about the approach that you take and really what consent is from your perspective.
I'm really happy to be able to talk about this because consent just means that both people want to engage in some kind of touch. That's what we're going to be talking about, using our kid power skills and rules for touch. So it doesn't have to be sexual, and it's something that you can talk about from a very early age using all kinds of examples like with a 5-year-old and a little sister, ask first before you pick up your little sister. Check with mom or dad first and see if, are you able to do it? Is it safe? But also, is your little sister having a good time? If you're playing tickling games or teasing games or even telling jokes, I think kids all know the feeling of starting out with a teasing game that's fun, but then maybe it gets a little bit mean and then people aren't having a good time anymore. So consent is really just being considerate of the other person who you're engaging with and making sure that everyone's having a good time. And if they're not, if they say that's not fun anymore, then everybody has to stop.
Right, and you can start that at an early age.
Absolutely. And I think even parents will say they need to develop an awareness of this with their kids, where if parents are tickling kids, you can really be a powerful model when you stop anytime your child is not enjoying it anymore. It can be as simple as that. And I've worked with everyone from very young kids to college students, and the conversations we're having on college campuses, I just always feel would be so much easier to have with teenagers and young adults if we had been practicing and modeling respect for consent from a very early age. It would be natural then. It wouldn't be trying to bring it up, when they're 18, 19 years old.
Right. And you say consent education is really the key to helping to prevent sexual assault.
Absolutely. We want to teach people what consent is, how they can let other people know what they want, and also teaching them how to respect other people's boundaries. So the great thing about talking about consent is you don't need to know who in the audience might be potentially crossing someone's boundaries or who might be having a problem with unwanted touch. We're actually, you can reach everybody at the same time. And the truth is, on a level of feelings and thoughts and feelings, we all at some point cross the boundaries of those nearest and dearest to us. So learning about boundaries is actually really good emotional safety too, that it becomes a tool that shapes healthy relationships.
Now, Kid Power has put together a list of kind of safety tips. I want to talk through some of those.
Yes.
The first one is touch is a choice of both people, which is extremely important to learn early on.
Yes. So like we said with a tickling game, if both people want to tickle, that's okay. But if one person wants to stop, then both people have to stop. So whether that's any kind of game of tag or joking or teasing or tickling, you want it to be the choice of both people.
And that's a conversation for younger students, but when you start talking about those preteens, those teenagers, and those young adults, what does that conversation look like?
Well, it starts to look like if you want to kiss someone and you're not sure that they want to be kissed, you need to ask them. You need to make sure that the person you want to engage with any kind of romantic or affectionate behavior with is on the same page. And those can be somewhat awkward conversations, but that's why we want to start practicing this at a young age.
And having those conversations and having both people understand what those conversations will look like and how to handle them.
And it can be really simple. I mean, it can be checking in 2 seconds saying, are you into this? Are you having a good time? It doesn't have to be a long, wordy conversation, but just being proactive, checking in, and just making sure the other person is we want to have a standard where we're a high standard for our relationships, where we're actually caring for the other person, taking them into account, their feelings into account. So I'd really like to elevate it above even not assaulting someone else. That's the baseline, and that's where we need to be starting. But ultimately, we want to be developing loving, caring relationships.
And another tip is it needs to be safe and it needs to not be against the rules or against the law. And we're talking a little bit about that.
Yes. So touch does need to be safe. So on a playground at school, if someone wants to play tackle football and that's not safe, that's not okay. That's also probably not okay with the grown-ups in charge. It would be against the rules at school.
And if you have a problem, you should speak up. Problems should not be secrets. That's huge.
Absolutely. And this is where adults are a really important part of the equation. We as adults, whether we're parents, teachers, mentors, we need to have conversations with kids to let them know that they can come to us if they have a problem. We will listen to them, we will believe them, and we will figure out how to help them. And in Kid Power, we do practices where we even have kids practice interrupting a busy adult, because we say, even if mom and dad are busy, I'm on my computer, I'm really, really busy, even if I act a little grumpy when you interrupt me, if you have a safety problem, I want to know. And so I might, even if I'm grumpy for a second, I'll say, oh, thank you for telling me you had a safety problem. What can I do to help you? I'm going to put this away and focus on you right now.
And I think that's a good point. I think it's important for parents to be willing to do that and to recognize, you may be busy, but if your child is interrupting you, not always, but sometimes it could be something very serious.
Another example I really like is picture the teacher break room at school. It says no students allowed. Well, what if there was a fire in the hallway? Would they want you to interrupt them and barge in and break up their meeting to tell them about a fire? Yes. But for kids who are so concrete, you actually have to practice that, because they might hesitate in a situation that's maybe a little less of an emergency than that. But that's why we practice these things with them in Kid Power.
Absolutely. The final tip is it's never too late to tell, and you should keep telling until you get help. That part, it's never too late to tell.
And with the
we're seeing that now with the Me Too movement.
Absolutely. We're seeing that safety problems, abuse that happened years ago or decades ago. I mean, it's incredible how many people have had to tell about their problems in order to get help. And so we just want to really encourage that conversation, foster that conversation. And each of us, we can be that person who listens, who believes, and who takes action.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll talk more in just a minute. Up next, how to handle bullying. We'll discuss tips for both kids and parents when Tar Heel Talk continues. Today's show is all about child safety, and a newly released book written by a nationally renowned child safety educator who also happens to be a triangle mom explains how. It's called Doing Right by Our Kids, and with us again is its co-author, Dr. Amy Tiemann. Thank you again for being with us. And before the break, you gave some really powerful tips to help children kind of understand the what's appropriate and how to set those boundaries when it comes to touch and I guess maybe invading other people's personal space, if you will. But there's another issue. We have seen time and time again, heartbreaking stories on the news of students committing suicide as a result of being bullied, and parents saying, well, we were asking the school for help, or we were reaching out for help and no one was listening. Bullying is a major issue. It's been around for years, but it seems in the day and age of social media, it's becoming even worse because there are difficult ways to control it. What is your take on bullying?
Well, I'm so glad you introduced it in the context of adults being involved, because really the first step to solve the bullying problem is for all the adults in the community to agree that it is our responsibility to create a social climate that is safe, it is supportive, and it lets kids know how to get help if they have problems. Because that context is really important, and that's really what we've built into doing right by our kids, is helping schools and other organizations understanding their role, because schools are actually legally required to create environmental educational environments that are free of bullying, harassment, and prejudice. So I want every student to know you have the right to be safe at school, and I want every parent to know that you have the right to advocate for your child. And one thing we talk about a lot in the book is being persistent to get help, that a lot of times families might take one step, but if they reach resistance or they hit an obstacle, they get stuck and they don't know what to keep doing. So we actually have some action plans for parents and action plans for school leaders as well about how to be open to hearing about problems and solving them. Now within that context, we do have a lot of kid power skills that we've been teaching for the last 30 years to more than 5 million people around the world. And we can help kids advocate for themselves within that protective environment. So once we know we have a social climate that's going to be receptive to them and it's going to be protecting them, and not just saying, oh, that's something that kids need to work out themselves, we know that's not the case. Then we can help kids with some skills that both help them with their own self-regulation and help them stay out of trouble with other kids. So for instance, just having teachers introducing mouth closed power and hands down power, that can help kids control their own bodies and be more safe with their bodies. And we have actually seen that once teachers introduce some of these skills into the classroom, we've heard teachers talking about seeing the fight that didn't happen, where two kids who used to be fighting kind of walked up to each other and were about to engage in something, but then kind of did the hands down power, did the walk away power, which is knowing if you and your friend are butting heads, you both know you need to walk away.
And what age groups are you using those strategies with?
Really everything from very young, elementary school on up. Yep, you can start introducing it in kindergarten, and it really kind of becomes life skills. Safety can just be the way you do things in a classroom. And we've heard teachers say that they really like the kid power skills because it becomes a shorthand to help kids, help kids get in line quickly and quietly, and it just becomes the way you do things. I've actually seen an intervention. Interventions can just take a second. I remember a time I saw a boy in the Montessori playground. A boy and a girl were playing tag, and it was kind of fun. But she wasn't having fun anymore. She started saying, "Stop, stop!" And he actually raised his hand out to hit her. And I was sitting right there at the school picnic, and I just put my hand up and stopped him from hitting her and said, "She said stop." And that was the end of it. It can just take 2 seconds to intervene. But the key is you really have to practice this ahead of time, not get caught by surprise. So a little bit of practice goes a long way. And that's why all of our Kid Power workshops are interactive. We're not just talking about it, we're getting kids up and moving and getting them practicing.
How can people find out more information about Kid Power?
Thanks for asking. The kidpower.org website has a ton of free information, and we actually have a Kid Power North Carolina Center Director right here in North Carolina. We work all around the state. We've worked with schools, we work with individual groups. We do a lot of private workshops. So if you look up Kid Power North Carolina within the main kidpower.org website, you can get in touch with our Center Director, Mary Jane Hayes, and just get a group of people together and we'll train you.
I can imagine that the workshops and the skills and the role playing will work really well with some of the younger students. When you get to be a teenager, talking about high school, different frame of mind, and they're very much connected to social media, which has added, like I said, another element to the possibilities and ways of bullying and getting hurtful messages out. What approach do you take with our teenagers?
What a great question. I love that because I used to teach high school. So to me, the two keys with teenagers are tie teen power training to the things they want to do. This is especially good with like 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th graders who maybe want to go out with their friends to the mall or to the movies or downtown. We use this training as skill building so that they can do the things they want to do. Or it's great training to have before a 7th grade class goes on a class field trip. So you can tie it to something exciting that they want to be doing. And we always make the training appropriate for the age level we're teaching. The skills are really the same at all ages. I mean, the underlying principles are the same, but some of the rules are different for younger kids and older kids, and definitely the situations they're encountering will be very different.
Absolutely.
And then with teenagers, and actually with kids of all ages, we want parents to be really involved with the online presence. We have a contract for social media use that we encourage grown-ups and teens to review together, and certainly ongoing conversations. It's hard to keep up with because there's always a new app, but I think if we can ask our kids to show us something new that they want to do before they're all the way signed up for it, that's always a good idea. But again, that open line of communication is going to be really important because we just can't monitor what's going on online 24/7. And the thing is, even if our kids aren't online, they could be cyberbullied by someone else within social media, even if they're not even on the service. So it's something that we really all have to be aware of.
That communication and just being very open and having your child be transparent with you is very important to keeping them safe.
And being in communication with the school as well. And also really telling our kids their digital presence is going to follow them. You know, we see these photographs that go viral that may cause kids to lose athletic scholarships or get kicked off a sports team or not get into college. Those are some really serious consequences. And it's hurting other people at the same time. So we don't want that hurt on either side.
Absolutely. We'll take a break. We'll talk more in just a minute. We'll be back with more on child safety after these messages. Welcome back to Tar Heel Talk. I'm Sonia Williams. With horror stories of kids committing suicide due to bullying and others regarding child abuse and sexual assault, learning more about child safety has become increasingly important. My guest today is an expert on the subject and has co-authored the book, Doing Right by Our Kids, Protecting Child Safety at All Levels. Dr. Amy Teamed, child safety expert, is with us again. Thank you so much for all of your expertise today. When you talk about child safety, you have to also look at the bigger environment that they're in. It's not just, they're not just in a bubble. And I know that a lot of times we teach our kids, especially when they're young, that stranger danger, stay away from strangers. But in the book you talk about the fact that stranger danger, that approach may not be the best approach.
You know, I think that's what we were brought up with, a lot of people our age who are now parents, because that's really all that parents knew to say. But I think the fact that stranger rhymes with danger, it was a little too irresistible to not put those together. But really what we want to do, and especially in the Kid Power approach, which is our foundation of skills for our book, is talk about stranger safety for a couple of reasons. One is that we use a positive teaching approach, and kids don't need to be afraid of strangers, actually. That's the really great news, is a stranger is just somebody who you don't know. And it can look like anyone, it can be a man, it can be a woman, it can be young, it can be old, it can be a kid. And if you want to try something, ask a whole bunch of kindergartners, a whole classroom of kindergartners, are you a stranger to anyone? And they'll be like, no. It's like, yes, you're a stranger to millions and millions and billions of people around the world. So we want to demystify strangers. A stranger is just someone you don't know. Now, the rules for interacting with strangers are different than the rules about interacting with someone who you know well, and especially when a young child is on their own. So we say when you're together with parents or your grown-ups, then you can talk to strangers, interact with them. I mean, if I was at Whole Foods with my son and you were the person giving us free samples, we were together, we would even take food from a stranger, right?
Right.
But if a young son was on his own in Whole Foods, maybe he was 9 years old, was old enough to be kind of in the next aisle over, looking at something else, we were not exactly together, then if a stranger came up and said, would you like to try the new, tortilla chips, then we want kids to check first with their adult. So anytime they would be interacting with someone they don't know, we want kids to check first with the adult in charge before they talk to a stranger or take something from a stranger, even their own things. So if a child was in the front yard and their kitten ran out to the street and a stranger picked up the kitten and said, oh, please come get your kitten, we actually train kids, we practice with them in Kid Power to walk back to their grown-up and say, stranger has our kitten, and then you go together. So we want them to check first. We want them to stay out of reach of a stranger. We practice what out of reach looks like, how far that is. It's a lot farther than most kids think it would be. So you don't want to answer questions, talk to a stranger, or take anything from a stranger until you check first. And check first is a great rule because you also want to check first before you change the plan, which can prevent a lot of safety problems, even among adults in a household, making sure everybody's on the same page. But we want to be consistent. Part of the problem with stranger danger is if you say don't talk to strangers, then you say, someone at the store says, oh, what a pretty little girl, I really like your hair. And then we say, well, say thank you to the nice lady, right? So it's more consistent to say when we're together, it's okay to say thank you to nice lady.
Right.
But when you're on your own, we're going to always check first.
Right. And it's important for not just the workshops, but for the parent and the child to practice that.
Absolutely.
On a regular basis.
Yes, and it can be hard if you imagine walking away from your kitten. That would be really hard. Walking away from your bike or skateboard or something that you left outside. We actually have them pretend to practice that because it would be a hard choice for them to do.
And there are some things, you talk about 3 danger signs or warning signs that parents need to look for when they're choosing, and I never even thought about this, a summer camp or some type of organization, a sports club for your child to participate in. What are those?
This is something we go into great detail in the book, but I'll tell you really quickly. First, you want to make sure that the program you're considering knows that they are a youth-serving organization. The grown-ups in this case are going to have to do research. Don't just assume because of a name or a reputation that something is a good program. Because even a university leading a sports camp in the summer, it's only been recently that universities have realized, oh, we are youth-serving programs. Just because you coach soccer during the year, it's different having 8th graders in the summer. So make sure the program knows how to teach what they're teaching. If it's a football camp, they better be good at teaching football. They better be good at teaching it safely, understanding things about hydration and breaks and not overheating, and making sure they follow the rules for youth-serving organizations. Some of the best practices for abuse prevention, which would include having 2 adults present and having appropriate child supervision. And then finally, I think a really big sign to look out for is if you as a parent want to observe, and if you have questions and you should be asking about their policies for child safety, really look at the response you're getting from that organization. If they're offended, if they don't want to talk about it, if they don't want to let you observe, that's a huge red flag, and don't choose that program.
Excellent advice, Dr. Amy Tiemann. Thank you so much for being here with us, and thank you for sharing this great information with us today.
Thank you, Sonia.
Okay. That's it for this week's Tar Heel Talk. To comment on this or other episodes of the show, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, or send us an email to tarheeltalk@fox50.com. I'm Sonia Williams. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again next week.